Hi everybody, this is Jordi V, and today I'm gonna show you how I made this track in the style of Boreal. So things to keep in mind when trying to recreate or make a similar kind of composition is you need to use a lot of lo-fi samples, some vinyl crackles, some R&B vocals, non-syncopated or non-quantized drums patterns. What else? Yeah, Reese bass, Moog basses, a lot of sound effects, maybe movie quotes. So yeah, lush pads, some violin samples, some video games effects. So this is the idea basically, is to create a kind of future garagey song, but with a lot of crackles and vinyls and analogy vibes. Actually, Boreal describes his song is like having the impression of going out of a club and having hazy memories of a rave. So if for this analogy, if we have the club as your future garage kind of UK based influence, you need to add some kind of distortion, a lot of vinyl crackles and vintage sounds to give this impression of nostalgia and give it that Boreal vibe. So let's get right into it. Enough with the talking. So I started this composition actually with the pads, so let me solo it. preferences because I feel there is some crackles or some glitches that I don't need. So yeah, this would be perfect, I guess. So yeah, actually for this pad, what I've made is I used this pad analog preset on Serum, and I added some chorus, some reverb, some saturation here, and finally I've decided to EQ the low ends in order to make more space for the kick and the bass later, especially for the bass because it takes a lot of room within this kind of compositions. And I've decided to also have some high shelf in order to emphasize and make the high frequencies more present. So I've played this chords pattern, which is like basic chord patterns. We have some triads in the key of A minor, nothing special here. Later I've decided to add some variation, and I've played the same kind of chords but with a melody line, and I've used it all over the composition, especially at the end, to add more variation and more interested into the sound. So yeah, that's it. This is for the pads. Later, let me solo what we have here. It's actually an empty track, so let me delete that. Here, this is actually a render of one note that I played in the high register, so you can achieve the same effects if let me do that. What you need to do is take basically pad sounds or something that lingers in the field, and just play a high note like this. Add tons of reverb on it. So yeah, this is the idea. Add tons of reverb on it, render it, and use it as effects for the intro. So if I solo my intro here, let me get rid of this also. If I get back to it, so this adds some tension to the composition and make it more interesting actually. So if it plays with the pads, it adds some higher register to the composition and make it more interesting. So nothing special, just a high note in the 5th octave with a lot of reverb and some delay, and make it and render it or keep it that way and place it towards all along your composition to add some tension and release and make it more interesting. So we have that. Later, actually, I've decided to play the lead with the pattern, but I didn't work, so let me delete that. I didn't use it all along the composition. So what we have here is the bass. So the bass, I've played it with Serum, but I didn't end up using this patch. Nothing special. Basically, it's a Reese preset from Serum again, and played 1 octave higher. So I think I rendered this this part, and I've added some effects, some EQ8, some distortion. And let me find the sample, and the result is this actually. So yeah, it's kind of subby, it's a Reese bass, it's aggressive, it's distorted. So effects wise, I used some compression, some mono from utility from Ableton Live to make it more mono and leave the space later in the stereo field for the hi-hats, the leads and the vocals. I also had added some overdrive to distort the low frequencies of the bass and make it more present in the mix. So yeah, what we have so far as the pads, the 1 note sample, and the Moog bass or the Reese bass. yeah, perfect. Later I've decided to basically add the drums. So we have the bass here, or the original pattern for the bass, and we have our group drums. Sorry, I don't name my track channels. Maybe I need to do that later for the tutorial and to make it more clear. Luckily here we have more naming, so yeah, let's get right in through it. So for the group drums, let me solo it. It sounds like this. So yeah, typical UK garage, future garage kind of beat. So I start with the kick. It sounds like this. So yeah, nothing special again. The kick, I've decided to EQ some of the mid frequencies because it was muddy, just to make it clear. So if I get rid of the EQ8, it sounds like this. So yeah, I've decided to EQ some of the mid frequencies in order to leave some room for the bass and the pads because it was already muddy with the reverb. So this is our kick pattern. It's basically some 4 on the floor kind of kick, but with a lot of variation to make it more more bouncy, I guess, and more UK future garage. Later I've decided to add some typical claps. So the claps pattern is known. If you hear it with the kick, you will recognize it. So yeah, it's basically here on the second beat and here just right before the fourth beat, which make that classic UK garage. Later I've decided to add, so let me solo. Yeah, for the clap, I EQ with some of the low frequencies and some of the high frequencies because the sample didn't work at first. Later I've decided to add some reverb and also some saturation to make it more vintage, I guess, more analogy. Next, I added some rim shot. So again, nothing special. The rim shot plays actually kind of it's layered with the kick to make it more interesting and more tribal, I guess. Later, I've decided to add this sample for the hi-hats. For the hi-hats, you can get away with the busy pattern. Actually, you can play them on your MIDI controller or experiment with the swing, but generally speaking, I like to add some samples to my hi-hats. I initially play a simple hi-hat pattern, and I decide to add some sample to give it that authentic feel. So for the drums, I have my initial hi-hat pattern, which sounds like this. So yeah. So you can keep it at this level, but I've decided to add this swing hi-hats from the UK bass, I guess, sample pack. So together they play like this. Which gives it this kind of call and response kind of feeling and make it more interesting. So the rim shot, the clap, the kick, and the two hi-hats plays like this. So yeah, perfect. The last element when it comes to drums is this one. With the percussion, it's actually, I think, cowbell. A cowbell, if I'm not mistaken. I've added some EQ3, some EQ8, some reverb, and a little bit of ping pong delay to make it kind of travel in the stereo field and makes it more interesting. So yeah, I've played it all along the tracks to sparsely. I kind of cut it here because it was a lot. So yeah, let me re-solo the drum group. So yeah, it's a tom, I guess. It's a high tom. It's not a cowbell. Sorry for that. So as for the group, I've added some drum bass, a little bit of drive to make it more distorted and more interesting. As you might see, here. It's a drum bass on 19% drive, 100% dry-wet. I love this Ableton stock plugin a lot. I use it mainly on most of my drums, but sometimes it might get harsh in the ears, so I advise you to play with the dry-wet settings and makes it adjustable to your ears, I guess. So what we have next, let me solo this. So yeah, this is a Foley sound effects. So you can hear some birds, some vinyl crackles. As I said it in the intro, Boyer used a lot of Foley sound and sound effects. Also in the drums, he might use like some clicks, some bops, some Foley snares, some I don't know, like firelighter as hi hats. Within this beat, I didn't use it, but I advise you to experiment with Foley sounds as drum one shots instead of classical drum patterns. So for this one, I didn't use it, but yeah, you can get away with that. You can experiment around it and add more interest to your beat. So the sound effects here plays more in the background and gives it this more textural feeling. So nothing special with the processing. I just added some low cut filter, some hi-hat filter because it was harsh in the high frequencies. Also some reverb, and I put it on -9 dB and kept it in the background. Nothing special with that. Here's the bass. We already talked about that. So next element is this. Kind of an impact in the reverb. Again, some Foley sounds. You might not hear it in the mix. It plays in the background, but subconsciously it adds more interest to the beat. So I advise you to add a lot of those kind of elements. Maybe pan them right, pan them left, make them play in the background. But yeah, experiment a lot. There is no rules to this, and yeah. Next, again, some rain sound. I cut the low frequencies with the EQ3. I didn't use the EQ8 finally because the EQ3 is kind of handy and fast to work with. I've added some reverb, some ping pong delay, and some saturation. So at 4 dB. So yeah, you get the idea, I guess. The final elements is the vocals, and the vocals are a main part of the style of tracks. Actually, with this composition, I feel that it lacks more vocals to it because Boyle used a lot of vocals. So when it comes to vocals, you might get away, or you might use some modern samples from sample packs. But generally speaking, he uses like some old R&B vocals, which he imports into his DAW and play with the pitches, play with the keys of the song to make them fit within it. I didn't do that with this track. I've used some splice samples and I've played with the pitch. So let me show you here our vocal tracks. So we have this one. So let me just as you might hear, there is a lot of reverb, a lot of delay, and some pitch automation. So here we have some EQ3 to cut some of the low end. We have some EQ8 again to curve more of the low frequencies. We have some reverb with a lot of 14.7 second decay time and dry rate at 55%. Sorry. Also we have some ping pong delay. And finally, we have the sound shifter from Waves plugin. So the sound shifter is on -12 semitones, so an octave down. And I use this manually with the automation line. Let me solo that. So as you might see, the on and off button is automated. So here the sample will play at -12, then it will play in its original pitch. So we get that kind of effects of male vocals versus female vocals. So yeah, I've used that effects all along the track, and here I've added another one shot. So yeah, nothing special. On its own it sounds terrible, but within the mix of the song it sounds amazing. The second audio tracks plays like this. Same idea, same sample, sound shifter, some automation, and you are ready to go. So also some low, some high cut frequency, some high cut filter. Sorry, I used the EQ3 here. I used also the EQ8 to carve the low frequencies, some reverb, and some sound shifter again. So yeah, this is mainly the beat. Actually, it needs more mixing. It sounds not that bad, but it needs more mixing. Maybe I will work on that later or now if I feel like it. And yeah, hope you like the tutorial. Let me know if you need me to go into some of the parts more specifically. If you need some tutorials about sound design. If you need another Boyer tutorial. As for now, this is it, and thank you for watching. Peace.